So let's move to tariffs. And we saw tariffs under the first Trump administration, which were, in the case of China, fully maintained under the Biden administration. Now we're talking about significant larger numbers. You're an economist. Do they strike you as the right level of additional tariffs? And if so, why? If not, why not?
I think they are at the right level, certainly the right magnitude. China has a very explicit industrial strategy to try to hollow out the United States industrial base and to seize leadership in a wide range of vital sectors and essentially make the US and the rest of the world dependent on China. And whether that's for pharmaceutical products, for communications equipment, for critical minerals, and to reverse that, to actually send a signal, look, we are okay buying things from all around the world, but frankly, we are not okay continuing to buy them like this from China. What you want to have is a very high tariff on China that makes it clear that a product from essentially anywhere else would be preferable. One specific policy that I think we'll be hearing a lot about is revoking what's called permanent normal trade relations. If you think back to the year 2000, when there was this big fight of, should we let China into the WTO? Ultimately, what was decided was to give China what's called most favored nation status, to say we're going to treat China the same way we treat all of our favorite trading partners. That was a catastrophic mistake and really is at the root of so much of what has gone wrong in the global economy in the last couple of decades, given the way that it flouts international rules and any concept of a free market or free and fair trade. And so that's I think what you're seeing on the China side. I think that is a place where we need to continue ratcheting up the pressure. And, that doesn't necessarily mean the production comes back to the United States in all cases, but it means we would much rather have it happening in an allied country anywhere in the world than continuing to let China dominate it.
The cost to consumers is worth paying to ensure that the Chinese do not have the ability to use leverage over the American economy.
When you're talking about moving production out of China into other countries, you actually have a lot of other countries that also have a lot of capacity to make things at competitive prices. And you still have a very large, robust, competitive market, not only in the US, but in among its allies as well, to be both doing the production and consumption. So I do think absolutely there are costs involved, partly just as a result of disruption and the need to move supply chains. There are undoubtedly some things that China is making especially cheaply and at least in the short run won't be made as cheaply somewhere else. But at the end of the day, I think what we have to do is step back and look at that trade-off we chose to make 25 years ago. The pitch that was made was, look, let's integrate with China. We will all enjoy cheaper stuff, and that's a great deal. And I think most Americans look at this and say, actually, this has been a horrible deal. We made the wrong trade-off, and we are worse off as a result. And if that's the case, then choosing the other side of the trade-off now is the one that's going to lead to the better result.
I don't want to get into a debate over exactly how much the cost is going to be in the disruption effects and the moving away from, and clearly in many cases, much cheaper goods. We saw with the 25% tariffs from the Trump administration first time around that, there were a whole bunch of goods that Americans had to pay more for. But specifically, we are now coming out of a much higher period of inflation. A particularly unusual period of inflation because of the pandemic. And that was just toxic for so many Americans. So I'm wondering if you think the timing here is going to be problematic of putting in significant tariffs, particularly against China, given the scale of that trade deficit the Americans are running right now and just how many goods the U.S., the average American buys inexpensively from China, given where inflation has just been.
The reality is that, as you said, we're coming out of a really unprecedented, for 40-year inflationary spike where you're seeing, 10% change in the price level in a single year. If you think about the kinds of tariffs that we're talking about here, even let's take the 10% global tariff. What you're talking about is a potential 1% to 2% change in the price level that takes time to phase in, and that then you also get to see the response of other sources coming online, which of course is the whole point. In addition to which, just to emphasize one other thing, when you raise money through a tariff, you don't set that money on fire. It's also tax revenue. We have a $2 trillion deficit. If I told you that there was some other tax that was going to go up to help reduce the deficit, no one would say, "Oh, that's inflationary." In fact, they would probably say it would help rein inflation in. And so I think it's really important, again, not to fall into the sort of rhetorical point of, well, we don't like tariffs, so let's try to link them to inflation in people's minds, and recognize that the policies we're talking about here aren't, and their effects are not going to bear any resemblance to what we just went through. If you actually believe that making things in America matters, which economists historically have not believed, they've dismissed, much to our regret. If you believe that matters, then we are going to have to find a way to put a thumb on the scale for getting more of that investment back here. And I think that's what a tariff can help do.